Petra is this magnificent carved structure about 140 feet high. And it was carved, it was hewn directly out of the rock. And that's the beginning.
What if one of the most celebrated archaeological discoveries of 2024 wasn't a discovery at all? And what if the greatest engineering mystery on Earth was never supposed to be built by the people we credit today? In October 2024, the world watched as cameras captured archaeologists unearthing a tomb filled with 12 skeletons directly beneath Petra's most iconic monument, the treasury. The media called it groundbreaking, the documentary called it historic. But within weeks, experts began whispering a very different story, one that involves covered-up tombs, recycled findings, and a television crew that may have staged the whole thing for ratings.
But here's what makes this controversy truly unsettling. Whether that tomb was genuinely discovered or carefully reopened for cameras is almost irrelevant compared to the engineering nightmare standing right above it. The treasury at Petra is a 128-foot monument carved entirely from solid rock, top to bottom, with mathematical precision that modern master stone carvers admit they cannot replicate. No scaffolding holes, no construction debris, no explanation for how a nomadic merchant tribe achieved what our best engineers today call impossible.
And that's just the beginning. Beneath the sand lie acoustic chambers tuned like concert halls, seismic shock absorbers that shouldn't exist in ancient architecture, and a massive buried platform discovered from space that rewrites everything we thought we knew about Petra's origins. By the time we're done, you'll question whether the Nabataeans built this city at all, or simply moved into something far older and far more advanced than history is willing to admit. The story begins with 12 skeletons and a chalice that looked exactly like the Holy Grail from Indiana Jones. In October 2024, a collaborative team involving the Jordanian Department of Antiquities, the American Center of Research, the University of St. Andrews, and the Discovery Channel made headlines worldwide. They announced they had excavated a secret tomb hidden directly in front of the treasury's facade. Inside, they found 12 complete human skeletons accompanied by grave goods made from bronze, iron, and pottery. One skeleton was even clutching a ceramic vessel resembling the legendary chalice from the 1989 film Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, which was famously filmed at this exact location.
Professor Richard Bates from St. Andrews described the find as having international significance because very few complete burials from the early Nabataean period have ever been recovered from Petra. Josh Gates, the host of Discovery Channel's Expedition Unknown, stood before the cameras and declared this might be the archaeological find of the decade. The timing seemed perfect, the visuals were cinematic, the narrative was compelling. But something didn't add up. Dr. Lucy Wadeson, a leading expert on Nabataean funerary traditions, was among the first to raise questions. While she acknowledged the location was interesting, she pointed out that the tomb itself wasn't exactly new. The Jordanian Department of Antiquities had excavated 2 tombs in that same area decades earlier and deliberately left this particular one sealed for future study. Her statement was measured and professional.
The YouTube channel Ancient Architects went further, claiming the entire discovery was staged for television. According to their research, Dr. Suleiman Farajat and a Jordanian archaeological team had identified and explored these exact tombs in 2003 and 2005. Due to lack of funding and the logistical demands of managing one of the world's busiest tourist sites, the tombs were carefully covered with protective fabric and backfilled with fine sediment to preserve them for future excavation. The intention was always to return when resources allowed. Then came the most explosive allegation. Associate Professor of Anthropology Layan Badal, who had been at the site in July 2024, claimed on social media that what the cameras captured wasn't a discovery at all, it was theater. She alleged that the film crew removed the 20-year-old protective coverings so the production company could pretend to excavate the tombs for the first time.
Even the so-called Holy Grail chalice was quickly identified by ceramic experts as nothing more than the broken top portion of a common household jug. Dr. Farajat himself, the archaeologist who had originally documented these tombs 2 decades earlier, expressed frustration publicly.
No official investigation has concluded that laws were broken, but the controversy has raised serious ethical questions about how archaeology is presented to the public. The line between documentary filmmaking and entertainment has never been blurrier, and Petra found itself at the center of a debate about truth, media, and the commodification of ancient history. But here's the twist that nobody's talking about. Whether that tomb was genuinely discovered or carefully reopened for cameras is almost a footnote compared to the monument looming above it, because the treasury itself is an engineering anomaly that shouldn't exist, and the more we study it, the less sense it makes. To understand why this matters, imagine carving a 12-story skyscraper out of a single mountain starting from the roof. That's exactly what happened at Petra. Standing 128 feet tall, every single inch of the treasury's facade was carved from the top down into a solid sandstone cliff. This subtractive method is a nightmare for engineers because there's no margin for error. If you make a mistake at the top, that error cascades downward and ruins everything below it. You cannot add stone back once it's gone. There are no patches, no corrections, no second chances.
In 2023, a team of Italian master stone carvers, craftsmen who have spent their lives restoring Renaissance statues and working on Europe's grandest cathedrals, stood before the treasury in admitted defeat. They stated plainly that they could not replicate this work with current tools, modern training, or even the best machines available today. The precision required simply exceeds what human hands can consistently achieve over the months or years this carving would have taken. 3-dimensional laser scans revealed that the builders used the golden ratio, a complex mathematical relationship found in nature, classical Greek architecture, and the Parthenon. The facade is symmetrical to within 20 millimeters across its entire 128-foot height, a degree of accuracy usually reserved for laser-guided computer modeling. But here's what makes it truly impossible. There are no holes in the rock for scaffolding. None. Archaeologists have searched every inch of the cliff face and found nothing. No anchor points, no support systems, no evidence of how workers could have physically reached the upper sections to carve them.
Some researchers suggest the builders used giant dirt ramps, similar to those theorized for the Egyptian pyramids, but the treasury sits in a narrow canyon called the Sick, barely wide enough for 2 camels to pass by side. There is physically no room for a ramp of the scale required to reach a height of 128 feet. The geometry doesn't work. The space doesn't exist. So how was it done? Nobody knows. The mystery deepens when you examine the tool marks themselves. In 2014, an expert from the Jordan Department of Antiquities spent months cataloging every visible chisel strike on the treasury's surface. His findings were disturbing. The depth, angle, and spacing of every mark were almost identical across thousands of individual strikes. The consistency is so extreme that it resembles machine-level standardization rather than individual human variation.
Human carvers experience fatigue. After even an hour of work, subtle variations appear in their strikes, slightly different angles, inconsistent depths, irregular spacing. It's an unavoidable consequence of muscle exhaustion and declining focus. This natural variation, sometimes called human wobble, appears in virtually every hand-carved monument in history. Except at Petra. The treasury shows no such variation. The precision remains constant from the first strike at the top to the final detail at ground level, as if the entire facade was carved by a mechanism that never tired, never wavered, and never made mistakes. Then there's the question of the vanishing stone.
The treasury alone required the removal of approximately 8,500 cubic meters of solid sandstone, enough material to fill 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. In ancient quarries across Egypt, Greece, and Rome, you can still find massive piles of discarded rubble and spoil heaps. Stone doesn't disappear. When you carve a monument, the removed material has to go somewhere. At Petra, the landscape surrounding the grandest monuments is unnervingly clean. There are no massive quarry dumps nearby that match the volume of
Some researchers suggest it was pulverized and used for other construction projects, but no archaeological evidence supports this theory. Others propose it was transported away entirely, but moving thousands of tons of rubble through the narrow, sick canyon would have been logistically impossible for an ancient civilization without wheels or beasts of burden capable of navigating the terrain. The stone simply vanished, and nobody can explain how. But the engineering impossibilities don't stop at what we can see. They extend into what we can hear. Acoustic engineers who studied the treasury and the monastery discovered something extraordinary. These monuments weren't just carved for visual beauty, they were tuned like musical instruments. Resonance profiles measured inside the urn tomb show acoustic properties similar to purpose-built modern auditoriums. If you whisper near the rear wall of the urn tomb, your voice is amplified and heard clearly across the entire front portico, over 100 feet away.
Researchers from MIT and the University of Amman conducted extensive acoustic testing in 2021 and concluded that the builders intentionally manipulated harmonic frequencies, possibly for ceremonial chanting or religious rituals. The angles of the walls, the depth of the chambers, and even the curvature of certain ceilings appear designed to enhance specific sound wavelengths. This level of acoustic engineering requires knowledge of physics and mathematics that supposedly didn't exist in the Nabataean world. Seismic studies reveal why. The builders carved shock absorbers directly into the bedrock. Some columns are not fully attached to the cliff face behind them. Certain corners float millimeters away from the rear wall, allowing for micro-movements during ground motion. This is a concept called passive vibration dampening, a structural engineering principle only formally studied and applied in the 20th century. How did ancient carvers, working with bronze chisels, understand and implement earthquake-resistant design that modern engineers only developed after studying catastrophic building failures? While the world focused on the Treasury Tomb controversy, space archaeologist Sarah Parcak was looking at Petra from an entirely different perspective: orbit. Using high-resolution satellite imagery from Worldview 1 and Worldview 2 satellites, she and archaeologist Christopher Tuttle discovered a massive buried structure less than a kilometer south of the city center. Measuring 184 feet by 161 feet, this monumental platform has no parallels anywhere at Petra. The structure features a paved interior platform, a colonnade, and a gigantic staircase descending toward the east. Pottery fragments found during preliminary excavations date to approximately 150 BC, suggesting the platform could be 2,150 years old, potentially dating to the very founding of Petra itself. Despite being so close to the main tourist areas, it had been hiding in plain sight for millennia because its eroded sides resembled common agricultural terrace walls. What was this platform used for? Nobody knows. Its size and sophistication suggest it was monumentally important, possibly serving as a ceremonial center or administrative hub. But like so many structures at Petra, it raises more questions than answers. Why was it buried? Was it deliberately covered, or did natural erosion conceal it over time? And most importantly, what else is hidden beneath the sand, waiting to be found? This brings us to the most unsettling question of all. Who were the Nabataeans, and were they really capable of building all this? The Nabataeans were an Arab tribe who rose to prominence by controlling the lucrative trade routes for frankincense and myrrh from the Arabian Peninsula to the Mediterranean world.
At their peak, around the 1st century BC, their influence stretched from Damascus in the north to the Arabian desert in the south. They were wealthy, sophisticated, and literate.
Yet they left almost no written records about themselves. Most of what we know comes from passing comments by Greek and Roman historians who encountered them. This silence is one of Petra's greatest mysteries. Egyptian monuments are covered with hieroglyphic inscriptions bragging about pharaohs and their achievements. Roman structures are plastered with Latin dedications, naming emperors and architects. But Petra's grandest monuments, the treasury and the monastery, are completely mute. No inscriptions, no dedications, no names. It's as if whoever created these structures saw no need to claim credit for them. Some controversial theories suggest this silence exists because the Nabataeans didn't actually build the original structures. Instead, they discovered them, moved in, and adapted them for their own purposes. This would explain why the technical mastery at Petra seems to regress over time. In archaeology, technological regression is rare, and when it appears, it usually signals a lost tradition rather than gradual development. The oldest, most advanced buildings at Petra are the most perfect. The facades, carved later, during the height of Nabataean civilization, are demonstrably inferior in precision, symmetry, and artistic achievement.
There's evidence for this in what's called the unfinished tomb. In some sections, exquisitely finished details sit immediately adjacent to rough stone that has barely been touched, with no intermediate stage of roughing out the design. It's as if the carvers were trying to copy something they didn't fully understand, producing isolated patches of brilliance surrounded by crude attempts at replication. Modern technology is finally allowing us to document what the naked eye cannot perceive. The Zamani project from the University of Cape Town has used terrestrial laser scanning to create a complete 3D model of Petra, consisting of 12 billion individual surface points. Their scans have documented everything from the narrow Seek Canyon to underground tunnels with sub-centimeter accuracy, preserving Petra digitally in case physical erosion eventually destroys it.
But even with these advanced tools, new mysteries emerge. Geophysical surveys have detected magnetic anomalies near certain carved niches where compasses drift up to 6 degrees off true north. Some core samples taken from these areas show no magnetic minerals in the rock, leading researchers to wonder if the stone was exposed to intense heat or electromagnetic energy at some point in the distant past. No natural geological process explains these readings. Only about 15% of Petra has been excavated. The other 85% remains buried beneath centuries of accumulated sand and sediment. As we look toward 2026 and beyond, new excavations are planned to open sealed chambers located 35 meters below the treasury. Ground-penetrating radar suggests there may be additional rooms and passages that have never been accessed since antiquity. What will they find? More evidence of Nabataean occupation or something older? More proof of brilliant engineering or artifacts that challenge our entire understanding of when and how this city was built? The answers are down there, waiting in the darkness. At Petra, the question is no longer what the Nabataeans built, but what they inherited.